Gorgeous.
Thank you. So do you both.
Well, welcome to our very second podcast. I am Coach Darcy, and this is Coach Nora. And today we are blessed to have Dr. Chantale. And I feel like I'm going to butcher your last name, so why don't you actually introduce yourself there, Chantale, before I do it? No
The
doubt.
last name is Lussier, but it's so great to get to be on the podcast with both of you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here.
Our pleasure, Chantale.
So the folks at home are probably going like, why is she on a Irish dance podcast or a athletic development podcast? What's going on? Who are you, and how do you fit into this world, Chantale?
Totally. Thanks for the question. And it's a fair question, of course. So my profession at this point right now is mental performance coach. So that means I specialize in applied sports psychology. But to link back into the dance world, of course, my first career was actually in dance and the performing arts. And so, as soon as we connected, I knew that I wanted us to have a great conversation because I can so relate to what your audience is going through, right? So to tell you a little bit about my story, if I may, my first career, was in dance. And so I was a professionally trained ballet dancer. I'm a graduate of the Royal Winnipeg Ballet, both in the professional division as well as their teacher training program. And then I was lucky enough to enjoy a 12-year career as a performer, getting to dance many different styles on stage, in film, in television, and in sport entertainment. And I also got to teach and to coach ballet, point work, jazz, hip hop, and creative dance for 12 years. And so, I miss the dance world in terms of being right there in the dance studio all the time. But at some point, I decided to go back into university and pursue some studies. And that's when I tripped into sports psychology. And the deeper I was going into mental skills and the mindset and all of that, I kept thinking, where was this information when I needed it as a dancer, right? And so now I've been doing this mental performance coaching for almost 20 years now. And I still work with a lot of dancers, but I also work with athletes and with high performers in all kinds of domains. So that's a little bit of my story and why we're chatting today.
You used a very interesting word there that I picked up on right away. You said, I tripped into sports psychology. And I'm like, most people don't trip into psychology. It's usually like, I really love how the mind works. I really want to figure out more. Like, I love deep diving. So how do you trip into psychology? Because I feel like
there's a piece in there.
Yeah.
There isn't, especially as a dancer, right? You'd think I would have been more.
How did that connect for you?
Yeah, I love that question. I kind of have two little mini stories related to that. It's interesting, you know how a lot of times in movies there'll be a scene early on in the movie that's like foreshadowing the future. I feel like I had that scene when I was 17 years old, and I had been auditioning for the Royal Winnipeg Ballet. 2 years audition. Thanks, but no thanks. Second year, audition, thanks, but no thanks. Third year, I was like, this is it. I was 17. I was graduating from high school. It was a big transition, and I really wanted to give myself an opportunity. And by sheer coincidence, my mom, of course, who is wonderful and a dance mom, was sitting in the lobby with the other dance parents, and she was having a chat with a parent about what I was trying to do in my life. Turns out she was sitting next to Dr. Terry Orlick, who in Canada is one of the fathers, if you will, of sports psychology in Canada. And he very generously gave my mom one of his sports psych books at the time. And so that year before my audition, I read one of his books like probably multiple times. I started to apply some of those strategies. And sure enough, that year I auditioned and succeeded and made it into the Royal Winnipeg Ballet. And the rest is history, as we say. And you would think that from that point on, mindset and mental performance would have remained at the forefront of my experience in dance. But of course, back then, even sports science hadn't really made its way into the dance world, right? So before I knew it, I was kind of in the dance bubble and I don't want to say I forgot those lessons, but I forgot to what it would look like to maintain that. And so later on in my career, when I went to university, I was going into education because I love to coach dance. So I thought I wanted to go into education and teach in the classroom. But then all my electives were in human kinetics. And that's how I quote unquote tripped back into sports psychology. And as soon as I took one of those courses, I was like, no, this now connects all of the dots. And has been a passion ever since.
Yeah. So you said like you use the tools that this doctor's book gave you. Is there any tool that now talking about it, is there any tool that like you can come back to in your mind where you're like, I find for a lot of us, like for Nora and I, when we finally hit something that didn't work, and then we finally get this breakthrough, it's almost like this like how did we skip this step kind of moment. Was it something like that, or was everything that you were learning brand new, or was there one specific technique that really stands out in your mind that helped you?
I love that question. There were a lot of great perspectives that I remember at the time, just feeling like I could relate to the athlete's stories and the examples he was giving. So even though sometimes we in dance, we feel like nobody understands our experience. And so there was the piece around like, oh, athletes, not their sports, actually go through these things too, right? So there was that piece that was great. But I love your question about a skill. The first skill that I really kind of sunk my teeth into was visualization. And I think a lot of us, including in dance, how many times do we, I know in the ballet world, you tell me if in the Irish world we do this as well, but in the ballet world, we would do a lot of marking, and sometimes marking with our hands, what our feet are doing, and just kind of like, yeah, exactly. We're speaking the same dance language with our hands. And so as soon as yeah, and as soon as I heard about sort of visualization, I was like, oh, in ballet, in the dance studio, when we divide things into like first group, second group, and you're kind of like mentally going through the exercise or the combination, I was like, we're kind of doing that. So then I really leaned into, how can I use visualization, not just for one exercise or not just for, a pirouette combination or one particular dance, but how can I use it all the time to really optimize my training? So that was one of the things in preparation for that audition when I was 17 years old. The skill of visualization is one that I really, really leaned into. And the wild thing that I still remember, it kind of gives me goosebumps actually as I think about it. I went to that audition, I felt great, and I felt not only the most confident, but the most at peace with myself as I was in that audition. And we know, like an audition, a tryout, it's always high energy and high adrenaline and maybe a little bit of stress. Yeah. But I remember feeling eerily calm and confident. And I walked out and my mom gave me a big hug. We both started to cry like happy tears, because even though I didn't know it, I would have to wait a few more weeks to get the letter in the mail back in the day,
Right, yeah.
But in that moment, I already knew. I felt like I had already lived the experience. And then it was just a matter of literally walking through the steps. So visualization is a powerful skill I used way back when, and still to this day help my clients figure out when, where, and how to use that skill really well.
Mm-hmm. Can definitely see that. So it brought you to a point where you could enjoy the stage more. Joy is something that I've heard from Mackenzie Mahler in particular, but from other dancers that I've even taught in private lessons. When I see them go off time or see them making mistakes and beating themselves up and all this stuff, when I take them back to the performance and smiling and actually feeling the joy and the love for their dance, it's like magic turning a light switch. And it's the coolest thing as an instructor that used to dance and now a trainer, to see the magic come alive. As soon as they're like, whoa. And I said, that was amazing. And they go,
and I think that's one of the pieces. A lot of times, sometimes people are afraid of going to talk to someone, and they sometimes might think like, oh, something's wrong with me, or I'm weak, and it's like, no, the same way you are training your feet and your entire body, why would you not train this part so it can enjoy the dance too, right? Just behind my laptop, I feel like maybe I can reach and show it to you. I have a little saying that, of course, in dance, we say all the time, right? I don't know if it's going to be the proper direction.
A big one for the Irish dance world too. Yes.
Yeah.
Right? The dance like nobody is watching. And I think all of us love that. And part of it comes back to what you're saying, Nora, about this idea of, can I actually for a minute give my mind a break, put my mind, on the chair in the audience, so that I can fully embody the dance. And so this is where I like to speak in the language of getting in the mental gym, doing the work in the mental space, so that then we're free to not think while we dance.
Yeah.
We're free to actually be in the movement in full body, every cell coming alive, because that's where the joy and the freedom and truly the power and confidence and movement actually flows from, right? But the irony is we have to know how to get in the mental gym so that we can, quote unquote, then get out of our minds when it's time to.
I love that you say prep to get into the mental gym, because it's pretty easy to walk into, like, obviously we're in our gym, so sorry guys if you do hear some slams and stuff going on in the background. We are in our gym, so but like I feel like there's some people buy into it and some people are like, no, it's just not for me. I'm just going to work harder. I'm going to drill more. I'm going to do more privates. I'm going to do more classes, and that's going to take me to where I need to be. And then they come to the day of, and I always say there's always something that happens that you cannot expect that's going to happen, whether it starts snowing and you have to walk across the street in your brand new makeup and your hair, and you like, even that just momentary stress like sets this domino of effects. So and then they haven't prepared for it, and they say, okay, well, next time let's prepare for this. You could mentally, like, you've been to Montreal before, where the conference center is, where you're going to compete, you understand like what the steps are, where the stage is. So did you go through that? What would you say to a dancer that doesn't believe in mental preparation? What would be your best advice for breaking through to that person or that dancer to make them believe that the mental gym exists, and not only that it really will take you to the next level as a dancer?
Yeah. I love that question. And, to be fair, you're absolutely right. It's much easier to walk into a physical gym and see where you can address your physical training and what are the tools to it. They're right there. And then you've got hopefully some awesome human resources like both of you who are knowledgeable and skilled and who can share that, right? Of course. Where props is deserved. The mental gym, a lot of times, first of all, a lot of times people don't know who the great resources are, right? So they don't necessarily, who do I talk to? Am I going to like this person? Am I going to be comfortable? So I always congratulate clients when they first reach out, because I know it might take a little courage to just go and meet another human being. And then I always say it's my job to make sure they feel comfortable walking into the mental gym, which is our session, which is that 1 hour we protect. That's like, okay, we walk in at this time, we walk out at that time. We're going to explore how our thoughts, our feelings, and our habits impact our performance. So then to kind of come back to your awesome question, Darcy, around what would you say to someone who's like resisting, it's not for me? I might go, well, have you ever doubted yourself? Everybody sooner or later has doubted themselves, right? Or has there ever been a time where you absolutely were prepared to perform at your best, but somehow you weren't able to do in competition what you could do so well in practice? Yeah. Right. So a lot of times those are those concrete moments where people either go, yeah, I've doubted myself before, or yeah, there's something missing because I've got the technique, I've got the skills, I've got the strength, I've got the power, the flexibility. So what's the missing piece? And a lot of times people go, yeah, I didn't get good sleep last night. Well, why didn't you get good sleep? Well, because I was really stressed out and nervous. And before you know it, people go, oh, well, so does the mental side of performing actually impact your ability to perform at your best? And then most of the time people go, yeah, of course it does. And then do you know what I say? I say, well, welcome to the human club. All of us. I feel like I should make like little cards and be like, welcome, my friend, you're a human being. Now let's go to the mental gym and work on that awesome humanity.
Oh my God. The bridge
with humor. I love it.
I think
it doesn't have to be so scary, right? Like there are times where absolutely, if we need to cry, we need to be disappointed, we need
Love
to be
that.
mad, we need to be frustrated. I tell them, I'm like, this is what this hour is for. Let's go there. Let's feel it all. But it most of the time by minute 55, you know, as we're wrapping up, the people are like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. Right. And this is oftentimes people who have been nervous to come in to the mental gym and have that conversation, but they right away realize how much they were mentally and emotionally carrying, and that
Yeah.
it's possible to quote unquote put it down.
Yeah.
And you find it's mostly like they've stuffed it down so much, and then it bubbles up, and then it stuffs down again, and then it bubbles up to the point where I can imagine there's a good percentage of elite athletes that work their butts off that end up in tears with you because you get it to bubble up and to release, right?
Well, and maybe part of the fear is exactly that. Sometimes, you know, and how many of us, you know, even with family or maybe in our relationship or with friendships, sometimes we're like, don't hug me because I'm gonna cry. Like, and we just don't even want to go there, right? We're just trying to contain.
Yes.
But we realize like we can't live like that 24/7, right?
No.
People I think are afraid that if they start talking, the emotions will come and it'll never stop. But the reality is that this is human it's us trying to cultivate the best version of ourselves. So if we get to let it out a little bit here and there, check in with ourselves, see what's there. Yeah, there might be tears, but guess what? There might also be reconnecting with why you do what you do. There might also be discovering new facets of why you're so passionate about this and why you're so excited. Right? So people often think of all the things they're like, oh, I don't want to go feel these things. But if we numb out all the negative, difficult feelings, sooner or later, we're dancing robots. We're no longer feeling the joy either.
Yeah, which comes out in a very robotic looking performance.
Right?
Yeah. And one of our athletes that just left the gym, we talked to her about the difference between her bringing the beauty and the passion of her love for dance, and she has got something magical when she's just in full joy. And when she's not, it still looks nice, but it's missing that edge where the judges are literally like,
Yes. Absolutely. And to me, you know, as you say this, I get goosebumps, Nora, as you describe that, because you know, even when I think in the world of ballet as well, and of course, I've appreciated some incredible Irish dancing performances as well over the years. We've all been in the audience where we've seen quote unquote technical perfection.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And it does not move us. It
yeah,
does not move us. It like we clap, it's beautiful to my eyes, but it doesn't move our souls. And I think, you know, I don't want to sound too cheesy, but I am a cheese ball, so I'm going to roll with it, okay, if you don't mind.
not at
But
all.
I think in the arts, but I think in sport too, honestly, every sport is beautiful as well. We want to experience that transcendence. We want to experience something beyond just technical execution. We want the technical execution, but we want that thing on top of it. And that thing on top of it to me is when a human being is fully come alive.
Yeah, for sure.
I think you actually hit
Yeah.
this perfect moment that you didn't even realize. And you split it and you said this moment where a dancer, an athlete, and it's just like, oh yeah, like everybody kind of like splits them. Like we're a dancer, not an athlete. And it's just coming around. Like we've noticed in the last few years that there are t-shirts out there that say I'm a dancer crossed out and it says athlete. Because there is this huge component of athleticism in their dance. Like I have yet to see another artistic sport like this that gets your heart rate from 65 to 213 when we recorded for athletic performances. So 65 beats per minute to 213 in less than 2 minutes.
Incredible, isn't it?
2 minutes. That is incredible. That is hockey. That is somebody going out on a power play line, skating suicide back-to-back lines for their entire 33 seconds, except for these dancers are doing it for a minute and a half. If you're on the ice, just to put it into perspective, because we're Canadian, to put it into perspective to hockey, if you were to spend a minute and a half on the ice, whether you are the best defender in the league or you are a rookie, that is a huge amount of time to be spent on one shift and prepared to be at your absolute best. Not to mention the fact that you have to be makeuped up with a 4-foot wig on your head, with a beautiful smile on your face, and you're trying to
making it look easy.
Effortless.
I think
completely effortless.
Yeah, the whole point that I was trying to say is like, yeah, you're right. The feeling is art. The feeling that you want to give everybody is the arts and the passion. And then the athleticism, I think that's the mindset. And then how they have to make this beautiful cohesion on stage. And because it's so new, I think that's why we're reaching out to you, and why we reached out to Mackenzie, who's also studying performance for athletes, is to really find where this crossover happens, because recognizing that there is this huge part of athleticism within the sport of Irish dancing, or within the sport of whatever style dancing that you do, it's there. And to recognize it and then say, okay, now that you've recognized it, let's figure out how to meld these worlds together. So what would be a Chantale Lussier tool that you would say, other than walking into your gym, what would be a tool? Let's say I'm a month out from my big national. So we're going to Nashville on July 2nd. Let's say it June 2nd right now. I'm a month out. What would be the best tool that you could give one of us if we were going to be performing on stage and we don't believe in this visualization and this mental technique?
There are so many different skill sets, right? When I'm working with individuals, or even sometimes with groups, a month pre-performance, there would be a number of different, let's say, checkpoints, right? From goal setting, making sure we're really clear on the purpose. Why am I going there? What are the different things, both quantitatively and qualitatively, that I'm trying to create? What's the experience I want to have? And then what's the process that's going to allow me to get there, right? So certainly a month out, that would be one of the things. But as you were talking about everything, the athletic side and the artistry and the athleticism coming together, one of the areas, I kind of put different things under different umbrellas or buckets of skills, if you will. One of the umbrellas would be really emotional intelligence, right? It would be really making sure that I have a self-awareness of my emotions so that I can optimize my training leading up to my performance, right? All of us are moody. Me too. All of us.
Do you mean athletic and by intelligence of our emotions, do you mean like walking in the door and I'm like, hey, how are you? And they go, fine. But inside you're actually like,
you don't look fine.
I just had a total meltdown in dance class and my calf is sore and I'm going to be here and I'm trying to give it my best, but I'm actually not going to tell you how I feel. Is that what you mean by?
No, thank you.
Okay.
It's interesting because, oh gosh, we could go in so many different directions with this, and please bring me back if all of a sudden I go too far away from that.
Go for it.
You know, I remember in dance, for example, often being told, and leave life outside the door. And I used to hate that, by the way, just for the record. I hated that as a teenager and as a young woman, because I was like, I'm not built like that. I'm not a robot. I can't do it. Now, many, many years, I won't say how many years, but many years later, I realized there was some wisdom in there, but I didn't know how to do that. So the wisdom to me is that, yes, maybe I've had a tough day at school. Maybe I've had a tough day at home or in my relationship or with a friend or a coworker. Leave it outside the dance studio could mean I now get to take a break from that stuff because the dance studio is my sanctuary. This is my space for me. But I know way back when I didn't understand that, right? So now the whole leave it outside the door, I think there's wisdom, but we have to explain why. It's not, I expect you to be a robot. You don't have feelings. Your feelings don't matter anyway, so just be a robot, dance. To me, it's not about that. It's about, can I have awareness of my feelings? And then energetically, do I know which feelings help me and which don't, right? Sometimes if we're sad, there's certain exercises, like just dance sad, bring the heaviness. Maybe that makes you feel grounded for a particular drill. Maybe that makes you feel stable. Maybe that gets it out of your system. And then 3 minutes later, maybe we can get on with something lighter, more joyful, that actually allows, I'm thinking of Irish dancing and all that lightness and explosive footwork, right?
Yeah.
But if 15 minutes before class, I'm having that meltdown, I'm crying, it's going to be really hard to jump off the floor if I'm just suppressing those emotions. So emotional intelligence, it's hard to sum it up in how I work on that with clients, but there's a piece that's around self-awareness. There's a piece that's around honoring it. And then there's a really strategic piece that's around, okay, given that I now know how I feel, what do I need? And what can I do to either honor that feeling or maybe to transform it or move into a different feeling?
Yeah.
And the more we practice that emotional intelligence, the more maybe even between two different routines, two different performances, we're able to literally switch it, right? But it takes practice. It means we have to do that on a daily basis and not be afraid of our emotions, right? Because again, emotions are a superpower. We don't realize that emotions isn't, something ethereal that we quote unquote feel somewhere in midair. It's something we feel in our bodies. It affects our energy, right? So the more we can actually embrace it and start to learn how to work with our emotions really well, not only does that optimize the athletic side of our performance, but then it allows us to tap into the artistry as well, right?
That's interesting because the emotional intelligence that can come, especially for teenagers. Young teens must be a bit of a challenge to work with because their emotional self-regulation isn't quite there in most cases. So this is a skill for.
It's a huge skill, and to me, it's a beautiful challenge and a beautiful opportunity with younger performers, including teenagers, right?
Yeah.
People who are starting to find out, discover, and create who they are and who they want to be. But then, of course, there's hormones and there's life and there's students and they're athletes and performers, and there's so much going on, right? So for sure, the self-regulation, including things like breath work. Can I activate my heart rate on command when I need it? Vice versa, can I calm it down or take it down a notch if I'm like buzzing up here and I need to start my routine or be backstage just one notch a little bit calmer, right? So that literally physiological activation and self-regulation is important. But then the piece I find for teenagers, as you're talking about, Nora, I find the self-talk piece is so important, right? Self-talk, how we speak to ourselves.
Yeah.
It's a skill, but it reflects the relationship we actually have with ourselves.
Yes.
Do I have a
100%.
relationship with me and my mind, or am I a bully with myself?
Yeah.
And in my experience, a lot of times when I'm talking to teens, slowly but surely we talk about their self-talk, and it's like, would you ever speak to one of your dance friends like that, or to a family member, or to a, and people go, I would never say that. And it's like, well, then why are you talking to yourself like that? Like, are you bullying yourself? And in some cases, it's just a bit negative. But in other cases, sometimes people are so harsh, we could actually say like, wow, I'm bullying myself. I really have to examine the thoughts that I keep allowing into my space and into my human experience, right? And what if I just worked on my self-talk? Just that. As you were asking, Darcy, a month pre-performance or even a few weeks pre-performance, what if that is just the thing that I thought, I don't need to change everything overnight, but what if I decided that for the next 7 days, I would notice if negative thoughts came up, and I would try to replace them with something more patient, more kind, or more productive.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. What a great skill for the sport, but more importantly for life.
100%. That's the thing, I often say the things in the mental gym, they help us in the performance realm for sure. But then, I say life is your mental gym, all of it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So,
yeah, absolutely.
I kind of love that. There was a moment when we started working out together, and a bit about my past, I had 95% male clientele. And so when we talk about dealing with your emotions, like it was just non-existent. I had like 1 or 2 really sensitive souls, which was great. Because when they did have those like meltdowns, it was like, it's all good, bud, you're gonna be fine. And like guys are pretty quick to come around and recognize, or at least like male teenagers I found are really quick to recognize why they are upset, deal with it, and then like move on fairly quickly. Whereas I felt like when I made the switch to work with the dancers and with Nora, like it was a lot more in depth, and they couldn't wrap their minds around why they were feeling this way or what had fueled this anxiety driven moment, or they weren't willing to like reach in and be honest with themselves over that. So
Yeah.
I kind of love that moment. So when I switched to working now, it's not the other way around. It's 90% females and maybe 10% males. And I've had to do a lot of work myself as a coach, because I used to go, oh, she's about to cry. Coach Nora, Coach Nora. Because
Helpline.
Yeah, because I felt uncomfortable, and I had to really kind of dig down and go, okay, why do I feel uncomfortable with somebody else crying?
Busted into tears.
Yeah, and it was just the realization of I didn't know how to make them feel comfortable with themselves at that moment. If I felt uncomfortable, I knew I wouldn't be able to make them feel comfortable. So it was just recognizing that what it was that they were going through was just that. It was what they are going through, not what I'm going through, to let them have their moment, just like I did with the younger boys. Let them have their moment, let them have their cry, let them have their punching bag moment, or whatever the feeling was. And then 9 times out of 10, if you let them cry it out or you let them talk, they kind of figure it out themselves. It's just that I find the female process takes a little bit longer, because I think we're a little bit more guarded. I don't think that we want to portray ourselves as weak or emotional or be accused of such. So I'm loving these tools.
Well, and you're bringing up, sorry, Darcy, to jump in, because gosh, you're bringing up so many interesting and important elements. And the first one is, I want to say thank you so much for sharing, because I imagine there are so many dance teachers, as well as fitness coaches and specialty coaches in all kinds of areas, where, like it or not, as human beings, we are initially uncomfortable with other people's humanity and other people's emotions. And I love that you were kind and humble enough to go, wait a minute, why is this difficult for me? You know, and it is for all of us.
For me,
but why is it difficult? And even like if we think of family or relationships, a lot of times it's because as soon as we see somebody else experiencing any big emotion intensely, we think, oh my gosh, they want me to fix it. And as soon as we kind of realize they don't need me to fix it, they just need to feel it, they might need to express it, or they might need, as you said, Darcy, a little moment or a little time. 98% of the time, they don't actually want advice or fixing. They just want to be allowed to be a human being, a whole human being. And, you know, emotions are so intense that if we actually feel our feelings properly, they tend to be felt and move along.
Yeah.
Right? Most of the times, feelings stick around if we deny them. So that's the first thing I want to say is I love that you, as a coach, kind of recognized what is it about me that I want to examine, and how can I show up differently with my athletes, right? I think all of us can continue to reflect on those things. The other piece too, and I almost want to throw the question back at you, because you brought up, men and women and how people, or young girls and boys, and how they deal with emotions. Yeah. I don't know if people will be surprised or not, but who do you think I have more clients, men or women, or girls or boys?
I know a little bit about you, so I'm going to go with men.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm going to go with women.
Okay. I actually have more male clients, and part of that might just be the different sports at different times in my life that I'm working with, because I've worked a lot with different women's sport, and I also work a lot in different men's sport. But in my private practice, it's interesting that, there does seem to be a little bit more hesitation, or there has to be something really major that happens before young girls or young women are willing to seek help. And I think we've got to look at that as women, because men, actually, we would think they're more guarded, they're more stoic, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? As soon as a parent or a coach or a fellow teammate says, hey, do you know about mental performance? Like, they're actually really open. They want to learn the skills. They want to have a safe space to talk, but they also want to know what's going to be that edge. What are those skill sets that I can gain that are going to help my performance? Whereas, yeah, I think as women, I don't know necessarily what it is, and I don't want to generalize any gender. Of course, none of us fit into little boxes that way, but I do think it takes a lot more for us to finally go, okay, I need to talk to someone for real, and then we actually recognize not only does support help, we don't have to do it alone, but then there's actual skill set we can build in there. That's just life, dance and training more enjoyable and even more successful, right?
Yeah, and that's where the true love of competition, that I know you're a big believer in, loving what's difficult and loving the glory and the highs and the wins.
Yeah. And the irony, not to totally contradict what you just said, we have to be willing, I think, to even love the hard stuff, which means the disappointments and failures, so that we open ourselves to the present moment and to whatever adventure today's competition is going to be. And let's go see if we can win. Yeah. And let's go see what that would look like and feel like.
Yeah.
To really be in the moment and seize that opportunity, right? But we have to actually let go of the outcome and be willing to love all of it, including the hard stuff. I love that you talked about like the hard stuff, right?
And that's, as a dance instructor, that was the biggest stumbling block, generally for the parents first, who are trying to hold the space for their children at the competitions. And I trained kids, like some were 4 when they were doing their first competition. And when you get a parent that is like, why didn't she win? It's just opens up a huge can of worms for the kid and for the parent at the same time. But I've found through experience explaining to the athletes, dancer, parent, that the failures, what they call failures or not winning, is where all the best learning experiences come from.
Yeah, completely. And I love that you're bringing up parents in that, because of course, and having been a dance coach myself for many years, I've known many awesome dance parents and many sports parents. And I always say, you all do the car ride to and the car ride from, like, bless your hearts, right? Because and like we see a lot as dance teachers, right? And
yeah, we have some favorite fesh dads out there that are like, just they're so supportive, and that dance isn't their thing, but they're there with the dress bag and the bottle of water and ready to run to get tape or scissors or do whatever they need to do. Yeah, and it's just there's a little crew of dance dads, and I just like have the biggest spot in my heart for all of them, because my dad was there for me in figure skating when I know figure skating was not his thing, but he would be in the stands watching me do my twirls and just waiting for me at the end just to congratulate me, whether I failed hard or whether I succeeded. And I just love those moments, and I think they really are the like silent heroes behind the scenes. Yeah.
And that's the thing, right? As parents, I wish I had kids. I don't, but I always say I've got a mama's heart. So I empathize with parents. And a lot of times, parents do want to be the great supporters to their kids. But sometimes I'm even lucky to do workshops with parents, because even as parents, they're like, what's my role? Am I taking care of zippers? Am I preparing the bun in ballet, or the hair or the curls, or am I doing the lipstick? And like, what's my role here? Am I on snacks? But they're ultimately seeing the whole roller coaster ride of what mentally and emotionally it's like to be a high performer going to competition. They're seeing the excitement, they're seeing the nerves, they're seeing that glory when things just line up and it's a beautiful day. They're also seeing the tears or the frustration or the anger or the disappointment when things didn't go the way we thought or hoped they did, right? So I think this is where all of us as a community, as coaches, as parents, and as dancers, because dancers own their part in there as well, we constantly have to redefine what is success, right? Because yes, in competition, part of success is getting on the podium. Part of success is getting the points we want, getting that awesome trophy, getting that photo moment, right? And who doesn't want that, or that qualification to the next awesome competition, right? But if we only define success by those outcomes, we are ultimately putting our experience a little bit in other people's hands, right? Because while we can control the things we can control about performance, we can't control judges. We can't control whether that floor is awesome or a little sticky or a little slippery. We can't control if the music is at the right sound for us or whatever those things are, right? We can't control if we wake up sick one day, you know, or if it's, I don't know, if it's that time of the month and we're not feeling great, right? So we've got to own all the pieces as an athlete, as a coach, or as a parent that we can control. But then we have to have a higher definition of success that includes the results, but that also includes the qualitative stuff. What kind of experience do you want to have? What would allow you to love competition?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think we ask ourselves or each other those questions often enough, right? Like, what would make competition, aside from winning, which I wish for every person,
Yeah.
but aside from that, what would make competing worthwhile and exciting and worth going through, right? So that we can love competing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great one. What would you say are athletes' top 5 fears when it comes to perhaps what doesn't let you enjoy competition?
Well queued up, well queued up. There's so many, you know, and literally it's hard to narrow it down to 5 because I think as human beings, we have ultimately a lot of little fears and worries and self-doubts. But for sure, I would say the number one that comes up 9 times out of 10 is in conversations with athletes or athletes, performance, etc., is fear of failure, right? So again, this is where, depending on how I've defined success for myself, if I've only defined it by the results and the points, I'm probably going to feel like I'm failing a lot because we don't get on the podium all the time.
So when you say define success, do you ever have your clients define failure as well? I feel like there's also, like you just said, there's different levels of failure. Like I know for us that like a lot of the dancers, they do a recall. If you've made it into the top 50% or whatever the percentage is, you recall. So when we got them to do goal settings, almost every dancer, like across the board, it was like, oh, I'm gonna recall. And I was like, okay, so is that a definition of you winning or is that a definition of you failing? Like if you don't get recall, are you going to consider that a fail, and why? So I'm just wondering, if do you discuss what failures are with your athletes? Like what do they define as a failure?
Absolutely. And we've got to keep ourselves in check all the time, right? Because sometimes as performers, we will perform incredibly. And I'm going to think, for example, right now with the sports team, you could put down one of the best performances of your career and still lose the game. And so that's incredibly frustrating, right? And same thing in dance. You could perform that choreography with absolute perfect technique, with joy, with energy, with presence, and projecting that joy all the way to the back row of the top floor of the audience, you know? It could literally move people to tears of joy. And yet, for whatever reason, somebody else might outshine or just get better points that day. So all of a sudden, is that a failure? And so to your point there, Darcy, I think it is very important that we define both success and failure, right? Because it's much more nuanced. A lot of times we tell ourselves, well, you either win or you lose. And not that I'm trying to color everything with the rose-colored lenses here, but I think at the end of the day, to enjoy a long, successful, and fulfilling career as a high performer, we've got to get more nuanced than black and white. Because yes, you could succeed, like you could define your success, have goals set out, and reach 9 out of 10. Maybe the 10th one is that you didn't actually win, but maybe 9 other things. I remembered my choreography.
Yes.
That new skill I've been trying to master. Not only did I do it in practice, I was able to do it under pressure in competition. My musicality at this moment in time was excellent. My presentation skills were flawless. You know, and so all of a sudden we're able to go home. We still feel the disappointment if we didn't feel like we won or succeeded, but we have a deeper definition of what success is. And likewise, when we're feeling like we've failed, or I like to talk about micro failures to put things in perspective, we can recognize again what were the micro wins and what were the micro failures of that competition or that day. And then we bounce back, we actually gain the lessons, and then we get to really keep building on excellence, right? In a way that recognizes and honors that process instead of making it all about this one moment in time, which for the human psyche is a lot to handle when we do that to ourselves.
I love that.
Well,
I've
it
used
is.
it. I've used our testing a lot so we do testing for how many can you do in this length of time, and we use it as a base for showing them their progression throughout the phases. So like you started here, and especially if they're having a hard week or hard day, I find it's a really fun tool to be like, okay, do you remember when you did this drill in November? It's now January. Okay, we're gonna do this drill again, and you're gonna do it to the best of your ability. Let's do it. And we have all these great wins, but we compete with them. And so it's not like they're just doing themselves. Like we get into it, and they'll see me get really mad if they beat me, and they go, what's going on? Like, why are you so upset? I'm like, I hate losing more than I enjoy winning. And that is a really something that I've had to really work for. And when I met my husband, how I knew I was like, we were meant for each other, because he used the exact same line. And I was like, oh my God, I found my soulmate. I think he takes it to another level. Like, I think he truly, truly detests losing, which is okay, because he works, like you just said, he works so hard. And I've seen him where he's worked a lot harder than the rest of his team. And then the outcome, exactly what you said, in the last 30 seconds, the other team scores and they're just devastated. And it's just like, yeah, sometimes it doesn't matter how hard you work. They just fates are against you, or like there's just so many outcomes that you have to be okay. You need to be okay going into it. I feel like you need to be happy with yourself, regardless of where you're at in life. So I love that you said that. And it's like being recognized that like, it's okay to fail, but what is your failure? You know what I mean? Like, and in a judged event in Irish dance, like we've
Subjectives.
Oh man.
Well, and this is where we better define the process, right? Whether it's sport, team sport, individual sport, dance, we better define what that process is that we're committed to, as we say, well, I'm just going to keep working harder. Okay, at what? And why does it matter?
Yeah.
And then exactly. And the piece around, like, I think it's awesome the way you're describing it, like hating losing, because let's face it, that's one pretty great motivator right there. But I think it's also important that when we actually succeed, that for a little moment, we know how to savor it, right? And a lot of times high performers are so like, okay, next. They don't even take the time to savor it. So that's one of the things with my clients. I'm like, yes, we're going to focus on the process. We're going to aim for the win. We're going to do everything we can to help you succeed time and time and time again. But in those moments where we get to actually pause for a split second, let's celebrate each other's success. Let's savor our own success, because that's the stuff. First of all, isn't that why we're doing it? Is to actually experience beautiful moments. So let's actually be present in them and enjoy them and savor them. And then they become fuel for us to wake up the next morning and honor the process once again as we keep working hard, right? Sorry, go ahead, Nora.
This day and age, I see this other thread that's really important is the connection. And it's not just like coming out of COVID is a prime example of everybody had to keep their distance, no hugging, no touching, and all this. And that is a beautiful moment to connect people together back into community and out of their own heads.
Greatly.
And that's relationships, right?
And isn't it one of the beautiful things about dance and competition and sport and all these different venues where we get to, meet people from all over the world or all over the city or all over the province or region. And maybe we don't see these people all the time. And yeah, there are competitors, but they can also be our friends and inspire us and motivate us. And yeah, maybe we hope we're beating them at the next competition. But when they happen to have a better day, then let's experience joy with them. And hopefully when we win, maybe they'll be happy for us and be inspired by us too, right? Because that connection piece, like as much as those wins may matter, 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, it's those moments of connection and those moments of performance bliss that we enjoy, right? And a lot of times it has to do with connection. So I love that you're bringing it back to that piece,
Totally.
humanity and community.
We have a beautiful little dancer who I don't think recognizes her power in that. She is known, and I don't even know if she knows how well she's known as like the fest cheerleader. And I'm reaching out to her dad and I said, your daughter is just the absolute sweetest, because she cheers everybody on. And when we tell another school from another city, like in a different part of the province, like, oh yeah, that so-and-so is coming to join us today. And they're like, oh my God, I love her. She always cheers me on. She always Instagrams me like good luck. She always does. And it's always positive. And, you know, like just that vibe lifts these dancers up, because most of the time when we're like, hey guys, another dancer's coming in to work out, they're like, oh, who is it? You know, like, oh my God, guarded.
What's cool?
Guarded. Yeah, so I love that. So number one, to go back, the top 5 fears that we were discussing, I think the first one was fear.
Yeah.
Failure.
And fear or failure, sorry, or fear of failure,
Yeah.
I guess would be the best way to say it.
Fear of failure for sure is one. Yeah, there's at least 4 more I can talk about if we want to. Another one, of course, you know, it's the fear of disappointment. And this may sound ridiculous or whatnot, but it's amazing how as human beings, we almost guard ourselves. Sometimes it's not so much the losing we're actually afraid of, it's the intensity of the feelings that come with it, right? And we end up literally guarding ourselves, like, and it's interesting in the work that I do with clients, it'll come out a lot of times when we try to do goal setting, and I can get a sense kind of what people's goals are, but sometimes they won't actually verbalize them. And I'll nudge and nudge and nudge. And I'll give you an example, like depending on their craft or their sport, you know, the Olympics, for example, when athletes get to a certain point, you kind of think maybe it'll come up in the conversation. And when it doesn't, you know, or a world championship, right? If they're at that level, and it's like, why are they not talking about that? And if you nudge them a little bit, all of a sudden they're like, no, I don't want to set it as a goal, because what if because if I don't make it, then I'll be disappointed.
Yeah.
And you can see how people, they don't mean to self-sabotage, but they almost put a lid on their ability to dream. But that also impacts the choices we make every single day. We're playing small.
It would absolutely. Yeah, one of our newest athletes last week, I heard that's what she did. I walked in, I said, so here's our newest like world qualifier. That's your new goal coming up. And she was still looking at me like, but the initial conversation on Instagram was, would you like to go to Worlds one day? And she said, well, that would be pretty amazing, but I was one out of the recall last year. And I can't even imagine dreaming of Worlds, but that would be so cool. So when she walked in, welcome to the gym, our future world qualifier. And she went, oh,
that's big.
And then she went with 3 other athletes. And I said, go say hi to our future world qualifier. And they went around her, and they're already world qualifiers. So they were like, yeah, that's awesome. But it was a funny look on her face of, oh my God, I just stepped into the arena that I didn't know I was going to have to get used to. And that's cool.
Oh, and it's wild how it's almost like we have to give back, because as young kids are not afraid to dream.
Yeah, that's right.
A 4-year-old, they're going to become an astronaut, or, you know, the president, or the prime minister. Like they're going to say anything without fear. They're willing to dream. But something happens as we're preteens or early teens, where all of a sudden we start to, well, there's the whole wanting to fit in. And of course, excellence sticks out, doesn't it?
Sure does.
That piece. But then there's the piece around actually fearing the disappointment. Do I give myself permission to dream? So I love the story you're sharing, Nora, because sometimes it's almost like we have to say, yes, you're allowed to dream this. And guess what? We're going to do everything we can to try to help you actually get as close to and walk into that dream for yourself, right? But it's initially just recognizing I don't need to be afraid of disappointment. First of all, do we experience disappointment in life? Yes, we do. Can we survive it? Of course we can. right? And so then why wouldn't I give myself permission to dream the big, bold, beautiful dreams that actually live in my heart?
Yeah.
Right. So I would say that that's the second one that kind of comes with that. And with that, the irony is that sometimes people pre-competition, they don't mean to, but they'll accidentally almost mentally prepare for failure instead of mentally preparing for success, because they're so trying to guard themselves against disappointment. Right. So it's very subtle, but I can sometimes see it in the mental skills or mental preparation of people when they're like, okay, I just got to make sure this doesn't happen. And even their goals or their self-talk will constantly be framed in the what not to do instead of the what to do. Yeah. Do you, are you hearing that in the studio?
Lots of threads crossing your. Well, and then you add the other component of parental expectations and coach expectations. And some coaches, quite frankly, only love the ones that win.
Yeah. And that's where when we as leaders in the community, we've got to take a look at ourselves too, right? Because, yeah. And the irony, of course, I always say the paradox of performance, the more we focus on the outcome, the more it eludes us. The more we honor the process, the more we actually get to live a beautiful outcome, because the outcome takes care of itself. So this is where it comes back to be in the moment and dance your dance. Let the outcome take care of itself, right? But easier said than done, because you're right. There's a lot of different voices, and some of the pressures a performer sometimes feels are internal pressures, but sometimes they are external pressures as well, whether it's well-meaning coaches, but sometimes it comes out the wrong way, or well-meaning parents, but oops, we're putting a bit too much emphasis on results and we're forgetting to honor what it takes to actually succeed, which is the process.
Yes. And how is that one of the things that you deal with elite athletes too that are younger, is how to navigate through these fears?
Yeah, a lot of times, right? And, to sort of quickly say some of the other ones, like fear of embarrassment, which a lot of times has to do with the social comparison, right? Even as Darcy, you were saying, if there's another guest dancer, who is it? And like, do I dare open myself up? But what is it that we're fearing? It's not necessarily the other dancer. It's how I feel when I compare myself, right?
Yes.
So I often say to my clients, I say, when we step into the arena and bigger arenas, of course, it's competition and performance. There's going to be some degree of comparison happening, but you should only compare yourself under 3 conditions. 1, if it inspires you, if it motivates you, and if it informs you, if it teaches you and shows you something. Otherwise, do not engage in social comparison. Let them do their dance, come back into your own feet, and do your dance. Right? So that fear of embarrassment and the what will people think, whether it's parents, coaches, dance mates, right? We worry a lot, and shame and embarrassment are other big feelings that I think people are afraid of, right? We sometimes feel like the spotlight is even bigger than it actually is.
Yeah. And I think comparison's just the thief of joy. Like if you're comparing yourself to anybody else, you've immediately taken what you worked for and you're now putting it into this other realm. Like it's not you anymore, because you're judging yourself. You're not enjoying the moment. You're not in love with the what it is that you're doing, what you should be focusing on, because your focus is gone. Your focus is now on, is this person better, or do I look good, or did I do my steps correctly? Did I do enough to get here? They did more than me. Look at their life on Instagram. And I think that there is no bigger moment than what we've just kind of been through in the last few years. And I feel like this comparison, this thief that just lives everywhere in comparison, was just made so huge in COVID and those years where we were told to be indoors and be on screens. Because what are you doing? You're sitting there and you're being compared to absolutely everybody on screen, and you're comparing your life with everybody else's on Instagram. And what we recognized is that literally, like, joy in life just seemed to be being sucked out of everybody, to the point where we went to Victoria and we were walking around, because her and I make each other laugh like so much to the point where it's ridiculous. But we were like that. So we're walking down the street and we're laughing, we're having a good time. And I mean, I think we've just been allowed back outside now. And everybody just kept on looking at us. And she goes, is everybody staring at you like a lot today? Or is it me? Like, do I have something? Did we put our clothes on backwards?
What
like,
is it?
What is it? And I said, finally, after like day 2, I just realized that because we're laughing.
Constantly.
Like, nobody else is smiling. They're all walking around as if like somebody kicked their puppy. And I just don't understand. So and that's when I realized I'm like, this COVID has done something to us.
Humanity.
And I think a lot of it has to do with, like you said, comparison. It's really made people internalize what they have, what they don't have, what they really want to focus on, where their joy was, and that they don't have it anymore. And I truly believe that comparison is a killer. It's a nasty little thing. And
it's so weird. And I appreciate the story you're sharing. It's quite powerful and it's moving to me because it almost, I can almost imagine what it may have felt like in that moment, you know, with other people looking at you, almost like, how dare you feel joy, you know?
It was bizarre.
And given the global context, like we get that reaction, but then as a humanity, we have to go, wait a minute, can't I feel joy witnessing somebody else's joy? And one of my favorite words in Sanskrit that I learned, and I'm so grateful for the word, but for the practice that comes with the word is mudita. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, but what it means in essence is vicarious joy. And it's not that I'm living through your joy, but is that when I see your joy, I can experience joy. It makes me joyful to witness your joy or your aliveness or your spirit, right? And honestly, pandemic and everything and the many things I've been through in my life, thank goodness for mudita. Thank goodness for the ability to practice not only feeling my joy when all of a sudden I'm blessed with a moment of joy in my life, but that I can also experience joy when you have a moment, when you have a moment. And, you know, in the competitive realm, I think one of the things in applied sports psychology, one of the themes that's not talked about enough in sporting, dance, and life is positive rivalry. And positive rivalry makes me think of that young dancer you described, who's like, you know, the queen everywhere she goes, right? Because it's like, you know what? Somebody else's greatness does not take away from mine. And somebody else's success doesn't deprive me from my ability to carve out my successful path. We might not win on the same days, because apparently there's only one spot on the top of the podium. But, you know, if we stop being threatened by everybody else's excellence, we make more space for excellence in our own life and for joy in our life, rather than the thief of joy, as you said. So yeah, that comparison piece is huge. That's another big fear. And there's a lot that comes with it, right? Yeah.
The comparison of self from not placing like you did last year.
Yes.
Big one for a couple of our athletes where you can see them on stage and they're smiling because they're in top 10 in this major competition, and then they end up 9th, but they wanted 5th, and you can see the deflation. They're trying to hold it together, and then they come off and they're really disappointed. At the same time, it's like, that was still bloody amazing. But they're not ready to accept the joy of that moment for what it is, because they're so far back a year before and wanting to be better instead of recognizing how they were better.
Exactly. And this is a tricky part, right? Because in many ways, what will we sometimes say, and I even say this sometimes to my clients, like, you're not actually competing with other people, you're competing with yourself. It's you against the person in the mirror. Like, there's all these quotes and memes, and, you know, we're all on social media, we see them, right? But when is that working in our favor and when is that detrimental, right? For example, I don't know if this is the case for that particular dancer you're thinking about, but sometimes someone may not place as well as they did the year before, but maybe they were away from dance for 3 months because of an injury. And what a comeback.
Yeah.
For them to be able to perform with excellence now, not to mention what a joy to be back to doing what they love, right? So this is again where we have to really flesh out that definition of success again, so that, yeah, we feel the disappointment. It's okay if sometimes we don't meet our goals, but we still notice the micro wins that allow us to see the growth and development when we zoom back out in the big picture,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
To the
Yes.
minutia of the moment, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of things, you know, the some of the other fears, of course, is a lot of times what I hear is deep down, people are afraid that maybe they're just not good enough, you know, and people start to think, what if I don't have it? What if I don't have the talent I need to accomplish my goals, right? And then another big fear is, ironically, when people succeed, sometimes they feel like, well, what if I don't deserve it? Right? They ironically feel like maybe they're not worthy of it. So it's interesting how these things sometimes are way underneath, but they're bubbling up into the experience of competition, right?
Yes.
They just look different on different people, but we see it, we hear it. But
I
yeah,
love how you paint that picture. So I can think of several dancers when I used to run my dance academy, and athletes still that dance, that I stand in front of them, and I give them feedback. She trains them, beats them up. I beat them up, and then I ask for the feedback about what their TCRG or dance instructor is giving. And then I still look at them and say things like, the one thing you're missing is the confidence to step into the new arena of excellence and believing that you can be that champion with amazing mindset. And a few times I've seen them actually go into tears immediately, because that's all that's stopping them from pushing a little bit more, from bringing the joy forward, from embracing going up on the world stage instead of crumbling, and actually believing that they're going to be extremely successful while having a lot of fun.
totally. And this is the thing, you know, when we think about it, and I think back to, even to my own dancing career, and I'm like, how did I do that? Like at the end of the day, it takes so much courage for all these awesome humans to get on stage on a spotlight,
Yeah.
ready, and 5, 6, 7, 8, like showtime. It takes courage to quote unquote be seen. And I think the more we can get comfortable, first of all, with who we are, comfortable in our own skin, and then, as you're saying, Nora, have that healthy confidence that actually becomes like the wind at our back, where we're able to be our own best cheerleader, our own best ally, instead of our own worst enemy, right? I think back to my dance career. I did a lot of things right. I was, you know, blessed with some natural talent. As a late starter, I was able to catch up. I was quite a technician. I loved to study movement and the technique, and I had a passion for it. But I recognize now in hindsight, I mean, it's not by accident I'm doing what I do now. It's because I did not have the mental side of things. Nobody taught me what it looked like or how to practice being confident. I didn't have a model of what does it look like, the habits of excellence. How can I practice some of those mental skills, you know? And even a lot of the things we're talking about, how many of the things we talked about today are mental distractions, right?
Yeah.
And so if I don't want to get pulled or be vulnerable to all those mental distractions, do I know then what to actually focus on?
Yeah, that's a great piece for today, with the amount of distractions that teenagers have.
Exactly.
So many ways. So what I would love to ask you, towards our closing, the power pack from Dr. Chantale Lussier is, I don't know, speak for you too, but we are excited to work with you as a team and send you some athletes. But my question is, if I'm sending you someone that is an elite world qualifier and is really struggling to step into the next arena, to really believe and trust that everything is in place physically, that they're well trained by us, well trained by their dance instructor, but they just don't have that upper edge of mental mindset, what would you say to them if they called you and said, hi, Coach Darcy has just recommended that I call you Dr. Chantale Lussier. I am 18 years old and I think I need some help.
Well, first of all, I'd be ecstatic. So please do call and reach out if you want to. And no doubt, both Darcy and Nora, you know, have my contact info, or maybe we can even put it under the little video of how they can reach me. But, you know, the first time I made an athlete, you know, is all about the intake. I get to know a little bit their story and what their goals are. And then very quickly, we're able to identify the missing link and what are those couple of mental skills that for them are going to be game changers, right? And if I can allow myself right now to kind of put my dance teacher hat back on for half a minute, you know, I remember in the ballet world, for example, and I would imagine there's some technical similarities in Irish dancing. A lot of things need to align, right? I remember in ballet, first position, you know, knees have to be over the ankle and the pelvis, and, you know, everything had to be in alignment for things to flow. And as soon as things are out of alignment, well, that pirouette's not going to work, or that jump is not going to be as fluid or as powerful. To me, what I would say to that athlete is exactly that. Let's make sure your thoughts, your feelings, and your movements are all in alignment.
That is
And
beautiful.
so I help them get their thoughts and their emotions in alignment with the movements they want to do. That's all it is. It's not scarier than that, but it's really practical. It's very human, and it's very doable. Like, it's quite a lot of times when people first reach out to me, parents and coaches are both surprised. Like, yes, ideally, the same way people work on their physical skills over the long haul, ideally people get excited about working their mental skills because we're always human. So we're going to work on our mental skills regularly. But people are surprised at how quickly, within a couple of sessions, they make big breakthroughs. And it is because, you know, a thought or an emotion or a perspective or a focus was on the wrong thing. And we just shifted back into alignment. And boom, thoughts, emotions, dance.
Well, thank you so much, Chantale.
Total
That
sense.
is,
Nice.
I think that's the perfect way to leave it, because I couldn't imagine a better closing statement than keeping everything in alignment, whether it is mind, body, or soul. Because I think in order to be that champion, they all do need to align. And I think the stars have to align as well. A little bit of luck with a lot of talent and even more hard work. So thank you again for taking some time with us and our athletes.
Thank you.
I'm sure we'll be talking with you very, very soon. So for everybody else, this is Miss Chantale Lussier, the master of the mindset, with all our professional athletes. Thank you for working with our athletes in the past, and I'll thank you for the future as well.
Thank you so much for having me on, and hi to everybody out there. Wishing you all the best.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.